The Witcher, a series that came from humble beginnings. CD Projekt started as a game retailer, then turned into a publisher, which translated games into Polish, but eventually they wanted to make their own games. They decided to take the Witcher book series as a basis for their game and had a small hit with the first game, but difficulty with porting that game to other platforms, which eventually didn't happen, and the development of the second game almost bankrupted the company. But with the second game, which was even bigger and more successful than the first one, the company decided to dream big with part 3. And they achieved their goal, with The Witcher 3 being considered to be one of the greatest games ever made, and a pretty long one. Actually, I think I don't know anyone personally who played through it completely, so I was hesitant to check it out, but last year I finally gave it a go and played through the entire game. First, at the start of the year I played the prologue, but then put it aside for a long time until I continued it in fall and played through it. Just as a side note, I stopped after I was asked things about the previous games and couldn't remember most of it, unfortunately. I have actually played part 1 twice and the second game once, but there was just too much going on in each game and too many characters, so it's hard to keep track and remember it, especially years later. But once I went back, I started to enjoy it pretty much. The main game is split into 3 big areas: Velen, Novigrad and Skellige. And you have to chase after Ciri, Geralt's adopted daughter basically. Velen is the start area, Novigrad is the middle part, which can be reached from Velen, and then you get to Skellige, a Viking-like area that needs to be discovered via a ship journey. There is also the royal castle of the Emperor of Nilfgaard and Kaer Morhen, which is the Witcher's HQ, and both of them are smaller areas, basically containing mostly just a castle. The gameplay is mostly the typical leveling and looting for better equipment that you know from other RPGs, but there's also some more tactic and strategy, with all the oils and potions you can create to help you fight monsters or have advantages in general in the fights. But I mostly disregarded it for the main story of the base game. I did complete most of the side content though, and that for a simple reason. This game's writing is fucking great. I expected to be overwhelmed having a beast of a game like this, thinking it could maybe be like the later Assassin's Creed games from what I heard, but it's actually just a couple of side quests that are quite long. They are not boring, just long. They don't feel stretched out, and because they also have something to tell about the people involved and they mostly have an interesting story for the quests, it's always quite fascinating. There is no kill 10 spiders in the cave because reasons, but instead often difficult decisions that you have to make. Like one quest which starts quite standard with a monk telling you monsters are in a mine, and then you get into the mine, fight the monsters and a special ghost, but once that part is over there is something more. A Witcher fought and died here centuries ago by the same order that the monk belongs to, and you have a conversation with him about guilt and religion, and you can decide to offer him the monk to kill him or find some middle ground and have everyone get out of this with a new view on life, death and purpose. That's what kept me going and made the whole thing just more and more interesting. The game is also not talking down to the player, explaining every little bit of the story or what the player has to do. You have to put things together yourself, listen carefully and make educated decisions if you want to learn all about the respective story or have a good ending. You have to find books and notes and read them, read entries in the bestiary and make the right decisions in the dialogue. It just feels so much better than other RPGs I have played that were more recent. The dialogue is just so much more lively and interesting than Horizon Zero Dawn and not as fucking stupid as God of War Ragnarok, for example. But keep in mind I'm just talking about my view on those games here. No offense to players who like those games, but I really didn't like the writing there for those two. Here on the other hand there are many things that were actually similar to God of War Ragnarok but handled so much better. It's a child-father relationship basically, and both sides have their secrets, but the dialogue is just so much better. The end of the world is on the line in both games as well, but here it's handled with the necessary seriousness and just feels so much more important as it should be. I also didn't have any insufferable dialogue here. There are funny moments in this game as well, but it's only happening when it's appropriate and makes sense. And they don't try to be funny all the time and even force some comedy into lethal situations, which makes the whole thing just seem like a farce. No, here it's handled really well. Finding a person, in this case Ciri, is surely not the most original plot, but it is the path that makes a good journey, or a bad one. And here you find so many interesting characters and small adventures on the way. The Red Baron and his family tragedy are heartbreaking, and making the right decision is not always possible. Actually, the game often forces you to choose between two options that are both bad. I kind of wish that you could either have a third decision in those cases, or that the options are made under circumstances that really don't offer anything else in those situations. But often enough you also get just options that will move you along and are not bad or good, like who your love interest will be. Triss followed you for the first two games and you have more of a relation to her, but Yennefer also appears and has always been mentioned as the love of Geralt's life. And while she kind of comes out of nowhere in the games, I went with her, which also creates some nice moments, even though I wish they went more into why they love each other in the first place. They often just feel like an old couple bickering, but you don't know where the love came from. While Velen is mostly concerned with the Red Baron, Novigrad is teaming you up with Triss, and Skellige, which has some beautiful snowy areas, pairs you up with Yennefer. But you also meet old friends like Zoltan, Dandelion, Roach, and old foes like Foltest, Philippa and Dijkstra. Once you have been in all the areas, you will be traveling through those areas again and get some more allies to fight off the Wild Hunt, which is led by an undead elven king. You also play as Ciri from time to time and see her fight off dozens of enemies. It's all pretty well made and well written, and as I said, I wanted to play the side missions as well. But the main plot is also pretty good and your decisions matter in the end. And when the epilogue was playing, I thought I might have messed up and got a bad ending, only to see in the last moment that I did make the right decisions and got an ending that I liked pretty much and that was kind of perfect for the way I played the game. So when the credits rolled, I was pretty thrilled and on a pretty high level as I played through the side missions too and all the contracts. So that the fight against the Elven King was a bit disappointing as it was too easy. But hey, that was kind of my fault I guess and not the game's. I also like to upgrade and unlock the perks and place them and found the ones I like the most and get more vitality.
But wait! There's more!
Yeah, there are two expansions to the game. The first one being Hearts of Stone. This story begins with Geralt getting to a manor that seemingly has some crazy people in it that probably are not the owners. Geralt is still taking on the contract though and is killing a giant frog who turns out to be a cursed prince, which leads to Geralt being apprehended and put on a ship where he meets a seemingly magical man of some kind who makes a deal with him. If Geralt helps him with the man who made the contract, Olgierd, who owes him something, well, and then Geralt will be rescued. In lack of any other options, he agrees and the ship sinks. Yeah, this is not a regular trade or a regular mage Geralt is dealing with here. I read that the man, Gaunter O'Dim, is inspired by the Stephen King character Randall Flagg. And yeah, later on it kind of seems like it was. But Olgierd is also not exactly human, at least not human anymore. He basically traded his life for his wife and him, but things went downhill quickly. And now the man has a heart of stone, quite literally. Things are getting more and more revealed, the secrets and the deceptions of the Olgierd and also of Gaunter. It's a nice story and the ending was once again pretty good, having a good twist and the usual gameplay. And then ending with Geralt and Olgierd talking about their lives and what they have just experienced. Nice and mostly focused on the main story, but also offering some side missions that are also cool and give you more equipment. I was a bit surprised how quickly I got through this expansion. The second DLC is Blood and Wine and man, that was a long one. After getting a contract and meeting some knights in the backlands of Verlan and Novigrad, there suddenly appears a small army of bandits and attack, and Geralt and the knights fight them off. Then Geralt is informed that the knights have some more contracts for him, but most of all they want to introduce him to the Duchess of Toussaint. and they meet soon. The Duchess has a problem. A beast is terrorizing the area, and some knights have been killed. Geralt investigates and soon learns that a vampire or several vampires are attacking the area. But things are much more complicated than they seem. Toussaint is a whole new area of the size of Vallon that is more inspired by France and fairy tales. You have beautiful, colorful meadows and many monsters that are new and quite unique to this area. There are a lot of wolves as well and boars that are surprisingly strong and cause a lot of damage, even though I was at a much higher level. But there are some more enemy types, like a flower that attacks, but generally speaking the monsters here are quite tough, and while you deal a normal amount of damage, you receive much more damage from enemies than in the main game and the first expansion. It really felt a bit unbalanced. I mean, if I'm like 5 levels higher than the enemy, I shouldn't be struggling that much. I soon learned that I do have to rely more on potions and oils in this expansion if I want to survive. Something that I hardly did in the main game. To be honest, I kind of got a bit uninterested in the fighting in the main game, as I could just bluntly keep hitting the enemy and they would eventually drop without me even trying to counter or block attacks. But here it is much tougher. It made me rethink my approach, which is fine with monsters, but it's a bit odd that the normal dog suddenly has a very high level and I'm struggling more against it than with some dragons in the main game. Human enemies are still fine though. There are side stories, this time it feels like some were added to stretch the game time a bit, which is a little bit odd, as it would have been a longer expansion than the first one, even without having to collect 6 diagrams for special armor or completing 15 contracts for the ducal office. The main story of the expansion is also quite long, probably also longer than the first expansion, I would say, and truth be told, around the middle part of the expansion I got a bit disinterested in the story. But that's maybe because I did most of the side missions at that point and also completed some of the main game side missions that I still had open. Once I returned, I found myself in a story that suddenly was referencing more and more fairy tales and eventually bringing me into a fairy tale world as well. But a twisted one, as the girl that ramped up the fairy tales has left this fantasy for years now, and for example, the big bad wolf is now getting drunk with other creatures as it killed Red Riding Hood and the Hunter a while ago, or Rapunzel hanging herself in the tower. I mean, I didn't love the references overall in the game to other fairy tales and thought I would probably dislike it in this expansion, but actually it goes so dark at points that I ended up giving them a pass, because it's just so dark that it starts getting funny again. Well, the second expansion, even though it's quite a bit longer, is still quite well written overall. And once we get out of the fantasy world, it also gets even better, and the little lull from the middle part is soon forgotten. We get a family drama, and depending on our choices, there will be forgiveness or death. More death than is usually in a Witcher story. We have to put in the work to create a happy ending if we wanted, or at least something like that for this kind of story. But once that is complete and the main story of the expansion is done, there's one more thing to do. You see, there is a house that we get early on in the expansion and that we can restore and improve. And also depending on our decisions in the main game, there will be an epilogue. In my case, we met Yennefer again, and the critique I had with her and Geralt's relationship in the main game, that we don't really get to understand why they are even in love in the first place, except for people telling us that they were a lovely couple in the last 2 games, well, it's taken care of in this expansion's end. They just talk about old times, the future and each other. It's kind of mundane after everything that happened to them, and they also don't know what to do with their time now. And it's just great.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
This ending was fantastic and really well bookended the game, and it also fit very well to the ending I had in the main game and feels like a starting point to the future for those 2 characters that was shown in the end of the main game. It's just slowing down with a nice conversation. That's it. Not another big battle or a big foe, no new threat on the horizon that will tease the next part. It's just over, at least for a while, and Yennefer and Geralt can be happy. Thinking of the main game, this ending was just wonderful, as I said. The Witcher is, to no surprise, as good as everyone said. The story, writing and characters are the highlight, and the combat is also fine. The dialogue really puts you into the story, and the game is managing well to not hold your hand, but still be easy to understand and giving you the opportunity to act the way you want to, really getting into the character you want to play. Be heartless, be kind, be with Triss or Yennefer, use potions and oils, or have a Tapfer without all those extras. Be a fighter or be more diplomatic. How the story ends is up to you, and that's nice, and I will give The Witcher, especially in the Game of the Year edition with the expansions, which are often on sale and pretty cheap to get, a 10 out of 10. The only thing that was annoying was that Roach is kind of dumb and never comes close to you, and it's a bit odd that all the female characters usually have their shirts open, and even Ciri in Skellige, even though she gets a fur hood at some point, has her shirt basically open. I guess her boobs always stayed hot, and of course all the females are wearing high heels, even though they get into battle as well. But hey, it could be worse. That's already nitpicking territory here, and for a game that is overall so great, that's just a small issue. The scene on the unicorn was a bit long and oddly explicit though.